First of all, I'm really excited for this group. We have incredible knowledge here. So I'm very grateful to all of the guests that we have here today. And I just want to simply start it by turning it into a positive. I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is very exciting. We are in a time where there is an opportunity for great change, and it is necessary, and the community is definitely responsible for this. And at EYEJ, we definitely practice diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're actually building out a case study, thanks to Colin Getz, about how EYEJ leads with this internally, whether it's with our youth through our programming, within our team, within our board. I think it's very, very important. And furthermore, we really believe that diversity in itself is very, very important in order to create great solutions. And this is not just within the nonprofit space. This is whether it's tech or any kind of Fortune 500 company. It is a very exciting thing, and I encourage people to be curious about it. And inclusion is our responsibility. We need to include all. We have to look at our businesses, and if any of our customers, whether directly or indirectly, whether they're word of mouth ambassadors or customers themselves, are Black, we need to not only bring them to the table, we need to go deeper than that and actually have them be part of the decision-making group. And then equity, it is our responsibility. I think equity is actually probably the most important portion of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I actually don't like when we group DEI together, because each component is so important. But equity is probably the most important area because it is our responsibility to bring our own neighbors and community members to an even playing field. And there's many tactics that, the experts, especially Erica Merrick, probably can talk about, and I can express it and how we do it within the EYEJ organization. But I definitely encourage a focus on that as well.
It has been an interesting few months, right? So I have been in this space, and by this space, doing work around social justice, doing work around racial justice for almost 20 years. And I have seen the ebb and the flow of these conversations at different points. And of course, this is a high energy moment. It is, on the one hand, it is, I am happy to see the energy and some of the conversations that are happening in mainstream spaces, right? So we're hearing language in mainstream spaces that we would not have historically heard. So you're hearing, I've had to check my television a few different times as I'm watching mainstream commercials saying Black Lives Matter. And I actually have seen a lot of sort of very surface, very, everyone has a statement now, right? Everyone wants to make an anti-racism statement. And I think all of these things are great if they lead to some actual sustainable, measurable change. And if the statements that are being made are actually operationalized. I wrote a piece a few weeks ago called Black Lives Matter, Now What? Because I really want to see us move from just lip service and just language to actual practice. So what is going to be different in your organization, in your school, in your government agency, in your company as a result of the declaration, right? And there seems to be an understanding, a growing understanding anyway, about the reality of physical violence on Black bodies, right? Which is part of how this moment happened. Although I would, argue that I think it's a number of things. So part of what led us here, being in the middle of a pandemic, and then having multiple things happen, right? the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, the murder of Breonna Taylor, the murder of George Floyd. And I would throw in there also the incident in Central Park with Christian and Amy Cooper as one of the moments that kind of contributed to this moment, this larger moment that we're having. And all of that sort of led to this awareness or this awakening that we're seeing. But in terms of action and like moving beyond the understanding of physical violence, we have to understand the psychological violence that is also happening to Black people in organizations and in other spaces. And so I think it can be tempting for institutions to look outward and say, what can we do about police violence? And they should be answering that question, absolutely. But they need to also turn inward and say, what do we do about our own violence? And what does that look like in terms of our internal practices and policies in our organizations, right? How are we living the idea that Black Lives Matter?